Hello, ladies and gentlemen of YouTube, and welcome to another episode of Fanalysis, Avatar: The Last Airbender. I'm Reti4, this is GreyJedi91,
Hey guys.
and this is Antoine Bandelay.
Hey, what's going on?
Take us away with the episode summary, Matt.
Oh, I should have mentally prepped for that. Anyway, so this episode's called The Deserter. It's the 16th episode of Book 1. The gang is hungry. They make their way to a Fire Nation festival to eat. Things go awry, and they wind up on the run, and they sort of bump into this deserter, a deserter from the Fire Nation Army, Navy, not quite sure, named Zhang, who's a firebending master, and the only one that they know of who's not aligned with the Fire Lord. And in him, Aang sort of sees his chance to learn firebending. So that's kind of what we're dealing with this episode. Antoine, take us away.
Yeah, so it's another one of those like beautiful openings where you have like like a dawn or not dawn. I'm thinking about the other one, sunrise kind of setting, orangey feel, and they come upon a poster which says there's a fire festival. But the reason why I'm pointing this out because this is fresh in my mind from my own channel. But there's clearly Chinese characters.
You mean they're not poster.
White? Right.
Well, this is clearly one of those instances of Chinese washing, and I'm not happy about it.
Oh my God. But that just really perplexed me. I'm like, dude, it's very obviously based on Asian culture, and I'm like, oh wait, this poster is freaking can't be any more clear than that. But anyway, yeah, Fire Nation Festival. They want to go there just because it's like they think there's food there. I believe, right? That's what the whole plot.
That's their whole reason for going.
Yeah, as is most of the instances
Always
going
the reason,
to towns. Yeah, we need food. Let's go eat something.
But the thing that issue with this is that it's a Fire Nation village this time rather than it being some Earth village, and so they need disguises.
As a result, as well, all of the usual kind of character establishments happen. Sokka being, why are we doing this? Every time we do this, something goes wrong. Can we, maybe be a bit cautious? And Aang's like all eager to go. Katara's like, oh, let's see what happens. And you just see Sokka just in the background next to the poster of Zhang.
I like Aang's reaction is not, oh, it's a wanted poster. It's like, oh, look, it's a poster of me. That's such a kid thing to do. It's like, did you read it? Like, and that means that they're on the lookout for you.
Hey, that was cool for me in second grade when they would just type your name, like maybe for like roll call, and you would see your name typed. Because back then, like having your name typed was much harder than it is today, where you can easily do it and go to like your printer and print it out. But like then it was like a special thing to like have like a sheet of paper with your name like in nice like font or whatever. So I get it. I get it.
But we also get the shots in the background of the Blue Spirit and John.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah, which is
another person who is who knows.
Yeah. And we see him like all put together as well, and how he was perceived from the Fire Nation side of things back before he left, which is nice to see. As like
right before he was like disheveled. Yeah.
Which is kind of a nice like foreshadowing, because at the start you don't have his name. Like you didn't notice that the first time you really watched the episode. Like you don't know that that's
yeah.
Right.
But you say about the disguises. I particularly enjoyed the kind of over the top, humorous anime style, like putting on the cloak and having the ruffle. The animation of that kind of motion was really well put together. Speaking of the animation as a whole for this episode is absolutely stellar. This is clearly, in my opinion, the best animation we've seen thus far from the series. Particularly, and we'll get to the specifics of where this comes up later, but particularly in the line work of the facial expressions. It is exquisitely done. The kind of depth of emotion you get from the characters and just the way their faces are moving around and the expressions is unparalleled from what we've seen thus far.
Mm-hmm. I agree with that. At least it's the most consistently animated episode. There's bits in other episodes that rival this or whatever, but this one is like, just perfect, like through and through. I'm a little surprised that them putting on disguises isn't like a thing more often, because I was thinking about that this episode. Is like, yeah, they are just kind of walking around like, and he's the only airbender in the world, and he's walking around in airbending garb.
Yeah, that's true.
The other two are like
outfit.
Like we're completely just from the water tribe. Don't mind us. I'm a little surprised that this is pretty much the only time they do this.
They even make a joke, before they get the masks themselves, of him just pulling his kind of his robe up over his head, and it's like, yeah, this will be fine. I'll just hang around like this. Like everyone's like, oh, okay, fine.
Yeah, I think the disguises don't get really good until book 3 when they're like actually
that's when
dressed
they
up in the car
get,
they're supposed to be.
They change their entire
I guess
outfits
that
for
is. I guess that is the big difference. Is like this is a proper Fire Nation colony. Like this isn't like an Earth Kingdom town with Fire Nation people in it. Like this is all Fire Nation folks.
Mm.
Right, that's true.
Yeah,
There's no mix.
they get to the actual festival itself, and immediately don the masks. The comedic moment of them switching around. Katara's like, this doesn't work.
Yeah, which what I love about that is like they have the exact expressions underneath the masks of what the masks like are. Like Aang has a goofy smile and Sokka has like a frown for absolutely no reason, and they're both comically exaggerated.
Yeah, no, it's brilliant. But we see the first kind of real taste of established kind of festival style culture with the Fire Nation, and I like how even in this kind of open celebration we have the sinister undertones of the nature of the nation as a whole. With the Punch and Judy kind of firebending puppet show, with the propaganda there being the Fire Lord obviously winning and defeating, or the Firebenders winning and defeating.
Propaganda. That seemed entirely
propaganda.
Realistic to me.
Yeah, and also like in the behind the scenes features and the Avatar extras, they say like the Fire Nation actually adores Ozai, and that even continues on in the comics that happen after the show. That like from their perspective, they were like, yeah, he was gonna like send us into like a new land, and like it was kind of like a Nazi or like a Hitler kind of a situation. Like initially people were kind of like on board. Because he was bringing Germany back to like a power, and Fire Nation was being brought back to power, in that fashion.
And even when we find out later, the kind of initial impetus for the idea of the Fire Nation taking over more land, it was always about spreading the culture, spreading the advancements that they have, and that's kind
manifest destiny.
Yeah, and that seems to be how they kind of frame the propaganda wheel for the empire, or for the nation itself. We see here.
It also like informs like why, even though we come to realize at this point in this series that there's more to Zuko, like why he wouldn't have been questioning his dad's ways, just because no one really does. Like it's just not normal to do that there.
What an amazing lie that was. That moment that comes up later, it kind of defines that.
Yeah. And it's interesting, I guess, that puppet is sort of the first little glimpse you get at Ozai's face, which it's kind of funny because that's pretty much just his face. It's just comical is all.
Yeah. But we get that.
I always expected there to be like some kind of big reveal, but he's just got a face like anyone else.
No, like
when is his first face reveal? I know it's in book 2, but
it's in 3. It's in book 3.
Yeah.
Oh no, it isn't until book 3, right?
Yeah, you get partial shots of like half his face in the episode Zuko Alone, where it's all Zuko.
Really well
stuff.
played. That's well played.
Yeah,
and it's not obvious as well. It's not like you're constantly having this silhouetted face in front of you or anything. The way they shoot the shots whenever he's involved always gives like a subtle kind of a feel to how they're hiding it. It's not blatant, constant panning shots of just something getting in the way of his face or anything. It's really nicely done.
But then they watched the performance of the guy doing the fire dragon dancing thing, and I think Katara gets brought up.
Yeah, Katara's brought up.
Yeah, Aang thinks she's in danger because he's afraid of fire, and then he uses airbending, and they're like, "Oh man, that's the Avatar."
Yeah,
they get chased.
Which I like that part. Well, obviously it's cool because it's like this whole big shebang thing with like fire and like swirly and confetti and all that. But the actual move that Aang does is like the silhouette airbending move, like from the show's opening.
Yeah.
It's really
the one.
Yeah. And another beautifully animated moment with the confetti flying around and the fire and its dispersal. It's really well done. It shows again Aang's complete naivete. I mean, the fact that he didn't get this was a performance. He thought that Katara was about to be murdered on stage. It's like, it shows you kind of his 12-year-old self again coming through.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, also, when Sokka brings up that the whistle, like, is that whistle going to work? Aang's used the whistle before, and it worked. Was Sokka not around?
Well, it was never clear, like, 100% that was why Appa showed up, I think. It was, it could have been, like, at least that's my interpretation. It could have just been, I hope it works, and it's not just, bad time or good timing we've had before. But this kind of definitively proves it. That was a really good purchase from Aang. Great deal back in the day.
Yeah. It's entirely possible, though, that the writers forgot that Sokka has seen it work before. That's maybe that's what happened.
True. But Che turns up. This isn't the first time we see the guy following them as well. He's been kind of cloaked as a figure in the background, but I did not notice that he's in the very first shot, effectively. Just that shift of shadow in the background. I knew every other instance he appeared, obviously, much more obvious, but I'd missed it until we watched today, or whenever we did the opening for this. It was impressive. I did not see that before.
Yeah, it was good. It was a good leadway.
But he
yeah,
turns up. Great chase scene.
Yeah,
What?
smoke bombs.
Okay, sorry.
Is he a firebender as well, by the way, or is he just
I
like
didn't. I got the
collab?
impression he wasn't because he was
Yeah, I thought he wasn't.
using bombs. So
Yeah,
I mean, why would you do that if you could just use firebending?
Yeah, just a standard kind of infantryman that has been trained to fight with all the creativity and innovation of the Fire Nation, I think. But it was a really nicely animated scene and very short. There's a lot of chase scenes in Avatar, but they do a lot with the time they have dedicated to them.
Yeah, and then Appa, shows up and saves them, and then they get to learn a little bit more about who this person was, and his name is Che. And we find out, that he's associated with John Jong, who right now is just kind of like, we don't really know who he is. It's just kind of like
he kind of tells him, but Che is perhaps the worst storyteller in the world. So he's sort of like, he's a myth, but he's real, and he was a general or maybe an admiral, something like that. But anyway, he's a legend, and I am too. But you don't get to be a legend for that, though. Like I mean, like he's just, yeah, right. So I mean, he's just sort of like. Yeah, it's unclear from what he's saying.
Yeah,
I always thought that was a cool writing technique.
Oh, sorry, what?
I always thought that was a cool writing technique too, because if you as a writer don't really know what you want that character to be, you can have another one kind of like think about like so you get the impression, oh, he's high ranking, but I don't know exactly if I'm gonna make him a commander or an admiral, or he's like so you have the actual character say that like he's a something or something.
Yeah, have the lens be through someone who doesn't know the definitives. Sorry.
I'm gonna cast a line real quick though and see if this works, because we had help from a translator before. They told us what Heibai meant. Can somebody look at Zhang Zhang's wanted poster? Anybody who understands this variant of Chinese and see if it says what his rank was? I'm just curious. If that's a comment, or that's like for the people in the comments.
Do we know it's Chinese and not Japanese as well? I haven't actually looked it up.
Pretty sure it's like the person Chinese. Who translated for us last time said it was some variant of Chinese. I think they said it was Mandarin, but I might be making that up.
Yeah, I'm not sure which form of Chinese, but it is the calligraphy is Chinese.
Cool. All right. Yeah, no, you're right though. I like the fact that they've used him as the lens of describing him and the initial impression that we're getting from John. It helped with the whole myth, even though it's completely wrong. The whole idea of it being a myth kind of bigs up the initial introduction of the character. And I also like this establishes or it establishes first thing about him in our minds is that he's the first deserter to live, which is another thing that bigs him up because obviously you have to be pretty capable
if you lived
leaving the Fire Nation. Yeah, it's the big kind of establishing factor that we have moving into the introduction of him. Mm-hmm. Helps set him up very well. Also, we have swamp ninjas.
You said swamp ninjas?
Swamp ninjas, yeah. I'd forgotten they were in this episode completely. When I came in, I was like,
swamp ninjas, right? Attacking the power of Juju there.
Yeah.
But yeah, going back to him like escaping the Fire Nation, I think that for me, my headcanon is that he served with Iroh when they were facing Ba Sing Se, and I feel like the falling out that Iroh had could have affected Zhang Zhang maybe because we know they're close because they're both in the White Lotus, so they have to be tied in some way. So I feel like within the context of the war, maybe they had some sort of heart-to-heart while they were doing that big campaign, and they have a story somewhere where they both kind of agreed that not to be as involved. And the reason why Iroh stayed is because he has family that are part of the royal family, but then for Zhang Zhang, as far as we know, he has no one, so he's able to just kind of skedaddle.
Iroh has more influence to deal with if he stays, whereas Zhang Zhang doesn't have that. He can probably do more good outside of the nation.
But there's also kind of the ramifications of Iroh, because Iroh, people often say that Ozai or that Iroh abdicated or whatever, but that's not what happened. Ozai kind of swooped in and took the throne out from under him.
He was away.
But Iroh never challenged it, probably because he didn't want it for whatever reason. But the point is that after he abandoned the siege at Ba Sing Se, I feel like Zhang Zhang's looking at, okay, there is no benevolent leader coming to my nation anytime soon. The bloodline is shifted over here to Zulon's gone, but I've got this other crazy. So maybe he's felt less impetus to work for that man. You know what I mean?
Mm. I can see that. I can see both of them playing together and being the thing that kind of broke him away from the nation. Yeah, I think that establishes a good kind of lead-in.
I forgot where we are now. Are we at the
Swamp ninjas turn up to pull him away from the campfire, basically. It's like, oh, no, it's fine. But, we're gonna.
I like the guard is mean for no reason to Che. He's like, oh, this is Lin Yi or whatever. Like, isn't that right? Lin Yi, we're old friends. Like, shut up! Like for no reason at all. He's just
Probably
so
really
Like,
annoying.
they're really disapproving of him for some reason. He seems like a very capable soldier and full of spark. But yeah, they kind of do just. I mean, even at the end, they just abandon him. They just leave him behind. So they do not care for him at all. But yeah, he goes in to speak to John ahead of that. Again, the time they take establishing kind of the build up and the tension to our first reveal for John. Talking about him as a myth, talking about him as the first deserter, picking him up, having Che go in to see him beforehand, and coming back and then talking about him even more before we get that first shot. They really play up the introduction for this character, which I really enjoyed.
Actually, wait, do we know if Che is actually like an official part of Zhang Zhang's crew? Is he just someone who just admires him and keeps coming in and out?
I don't know.
You know what I
It could be
mean? Because
the annoying,
actually just be like
the adoring
coming in,
fan.
like, I can help, guys.
had that thought. Is actually, if you look at them, it looks like he's trying to look like Zhang even with like the
Right,
hair
yeah,
or whatever. You know?
haircut.
Like he's just a groupie.
Yeah.
That reminds me, actually, Che around the campfire talking about John as well is the first time we see that kind of deep line work that I mentioned before. He's got really pronounced facial lines and the kind of defined expression that even for just talking about his his little story, it the shadows of the fire, everything. That scene played out beautifully, even in its simplicity. From the animation alone, it was gorgeous. And he's really, considering how much of a minor character Che is, he's really well defined on the animation style.
Mm-hmm.
So we finally get to meet John,
right.
where they have a conversation with John finally.
I kind of like. Sorry, go ahead.
Well, I was gonna say I like the way he's talking about, or how he's able to notice just by the way Aang walked into the camp. He's like, yeah, you're not a master of water or earth or whatever. Because I think that it's cool when masters kind of can see that off of a person just by the way they walk. It's something similar. Something that always stuck out to me within Star Wars is in the Revenge of the Sith novelization. Mace Windu talks about how like when Anakin Skywalker is walking to him, he's like, wow, that kid's like a warrior now. He's like a fight ready like at all times kind of a thing, just by the way he's walking to him, like not by any other association. So I always like things like that where he just like can examine you with a look and it's like, oh yeah, you're not ready.
Yeah, and it's another thing that
really
Che
cool.
describes rather than John saying it himself. That's another part of the lead-in. He saw the way you walked into camp and he knew this already. So it's adding to that kind of idea we have about this character in our heads. And the first shot we see when he actually walks into the hut is just the opposed shot of his back where he's just surrounded by like the penitent circle of candles. It's really kind of well executed on our first impression. This is the shot we get for this mask that we've already had built up in our heads.
I would call this the best animated scene in the episode. It might just be the lighting of it, but like you talk about like the creases in the faces, but he has one of the most expressive faces that I've seen, in this entire show. To the point that he's such a memorable character, and I remember pretty much everything the guy says, even though he's only in like this episode and the finale, and like that's it, But something about it, he just the presentation is really great.
The way it plays out, it feels like the actual line work and animation was designed for him. The reason they stepped it up for this episode specifically was so they could show off this kind of performance. It's that kind of pronounced in this specific character. I mean, almost to the point where you don't see it from any other character in the rest of the series, even as the animation gets better and better. It's that kind of thing.
I think the person that comes to mind when I think of like a really expressive face also is Hama, which is much later, but there's a particular scene where that's true. It's not throughout the entire episode. This guy, he is like, and he's even got kind of like sort of beady eyes relative to most of the other people here, but they're just so expressive. I don't know exactly what it is, but this is excellent animation. But the subject matter of the conversation is good as well, because he tries to shut it down without even starting, just like go away or get out. And what I like about that is that they pan to Aang's feet and you see him sort of take a step back and then like a furtive step forward. I like that because his personality is usually not to be confrontational or like to sort of skirt around a problem. This is him trying to push through something or do it the right way. It's just he's speaking from a place of naivete, but he's still trying. You know what I mean? It's not his usual personality. Trying to find some other way around it.
Avatar is a master of small moments. I've said it before and I'll say it again. That is an example of them. This entire scene is built on those small individual aspects that kind of pile up to form the greater whole. That moment kind of him stepping forward, embracing and saying, no, I've got to face this. This is part of, what I need to do. That kind of sets up the idea of Aang's almost flaw in this episode, because while Aang ultimately makes the mistake that he does, that we'll talk about in a bit, the kind of intentions and motivation for him pushing forward and pushing Zhongzhon on this and saying, no, I need to do this, isn't like, I'm eager to learn, I want to learn firebending, by and large. It's kind of framed, though that's part of it, it's framed with the idea of, I have to learn this, I'm the Avatar, I need to learn, this may be my only chance. It makes perfect sense for him to be as eager and as insistent on this as he is. And little moments like that, and on the Zhongzhon side as well. We see like in just his expressions as he speaks, not just what he says, but how he says it. The kind of, this is almost not. It's like a broken man. He feels the weight of his past. The kind of and as well the yearning to escape the kind of curse that he feels he has. And everything he's saying to Aang, while also kind of a lesson. Is an expression of that in him, as this is personal want for him. The way he talks and the kind of motion of his arms as he's talking about the bending disciplines, earth, sturdy, water, kind of fluid and flowing. You see that why can't I be that in him?
Yeah, and also you could tell that he's had this conversation before.
Yeah,
I swear in my brain I literally see him having this conversation with Iroh, because they have very, very similar philosophies, and it's just like they had to have, and again, because they're in the White Lotus, we know that they've had interaction. Like they had to have had this epiphany together about fire, or just how to balance fire and how to control fire.
That's an interesting thing. Is like I was going to say the difference is that Iroh's not jaded the way that he is, but the thing is, as we find out later, Iroh's met the Sun Warriors. He's been to the originals. Whereas Zhongzhong hasn't. Which
is the point I was going to make. That's the biggest difference between them. That Zhongzhong's doesn't have the appreciation for fire's true nature as Iroh has, because of that very reason. He doesn't see it as this expression of life. He sees it as fire only destroys. That's his kind of.
It's easy to see why he thinks that, because of the way he's, the world that he's been brought up in, and the leaders he's had. Certainly that's all Zulon and so forth we're using it for.
Yeah, and the resulting focus on his constrained, restrictive nature, and the fact he stepped away from combat itself. He doesn't want to unleash what he sees as this destructive curse this burden he's carrying. But also he's the only other person, at least at this point thus far, that we see talking about the breath of the Firebender as well. So that's another connection to Iroh that we haven't seen anyone else, Antoine. So I can absolutely buy into the fact that these guys knew each other.
Yeah, I know. Like, there's too many clues
philosophy.
that they were pleasant for this.
It's
and it's funny because.
Oh, go ahead. Sorry.
Well, at the end of the episode, Aang has the same mentality, and that he doesn't until he has a lesson with the Sun Warriors himself, where he's like, "Oh, wait, fire can actually be about life and energy." That he actually overcomes, his misgivings to fire.
And the misgivings themselves backed up by his, understanding of Zhongzhon. This great master is spouting this, understandably so, clearly understandably so. And I've learned also my own personal lesson. It reinforces his kind of psyche when it comes to firebending for the rest of the series, rather than just his one mistake that he made.
Yeah, and he doesn't firebend again after this episode until it's time to learn it. Like he really doesn't do it. I'm not sure, but I don't even think in an Avatar State episode.
No, don't think so.
No.
But yeah. So when he swears it off, he means it up until he has to. But I think, you guys correct me if I'm wrong, but I know that it's established in the third episode when they go see all the statues in the Air Temple of all the other past avatars. They establish that there is an avatar cycle, but is this the first time that they established that you're meant to master them in this particular order?
It's
so that you learn the list.
It's alluded to before now, but this is the first time they seem to give a spiritual reason for it, if you know what I mean, justification by him.
Well, also I think it's also from his perspective, because he thinks that you're supposed to master those before that, just from his personal outlook. But really, the original Avatar learned fire first. That is actually the first element, it's the base element before all the others.
Oh yeah. I just mean
but I think
but
for
is it
him,
from
saying that.
I wondered though, was it governed from the place where you start?
Yeah, because I always imagined.
Roku learned fire, of course, but he went straight to the next one. You know what I mean? He went in the same order that you're supposed to. I just wonder. I get the impression that it's always been done this way, and it's supposed to build like if you're gonna learn this, you need to already know this. But maybe it's not. I don't know.
But I think I have that idea too. I feel like over the past few years, or past few avatars, I guess I should say, like it might have been that way, where they're like, oh, maybe we should have them learn these other ones first before they like mess around with fire, because fire is so volatile.
That as well, but I get the impression it is supposed to be cyclical, because if nothing else, it separates the two dividing elements. You know, the idea that people who are initially learning fire struggle with water. You've got that separation of air between, and the same with air and earth. There's that part of it as well. So it could just be the cyclical nature of the process. You don't have to learn it that way. It happens to be based on tradition how it's done, because traditionally when there isn't this immediate crisis going on and he needs to learn faster than he otherwise would, they go to a specific culture, as Roku says later, and learned for years under the specific master. So Roku learned air for presumably years and then moved on to the next stage and carried on like that. So it could be either. I mean, it could be a case of just natural progression as well as the kind of tradition that's been set in from the nature of the cycle itself.
What I love though is that basically it takes like a burning, what I say as like a burning bush, like basically the word of God to convince. Like that's literally biblical, of having some to convince John. Okay, maybe I'll train this kid.
Yeah, and alongside that, you've got the imagery of that kind of penitent circle of candles around him. He's kind of sitting there. He's keeping himself locked in, contained in this prison. It's a kind of visual representation of his ethos on firebending and his own personal spirituality.
I still feel like poking fun though, because I feel like anytime Aang's arguing with somebody, Roku could just show up if he felt like it.
Anytime.
Yeah.
Especially someone Fire Nation too, because they respect it.
Yeah, it's I get the impression it's something to do with the spirituality. He needs to awaken his full spiritual potential before he can just do it on command. And this one, he's got John's firebendingness. That's my headcanon anyway.
It's also funny. It's also funny to imagine. Because, so Zhang has like this discourse with Roku where like Roku's like, you will teach the Avatar firebending. And he's like, yes, of course I will do it. And like Aang's like, really?
Yeah.
That's great. So from Aang's perspective, was Aang just being like, please, for like the whole time that like, and he was seeing Roku or whatever?
It's not clear.
I wonder what Aang took from that. Like he clearly didn't realize Roku was there,
Yeah, we also get the first bit of hesitation in this discussion with Roku from John. He's like, no, I did not mean that. You see this kind of conflict within him about. I mean, that's a simple sentence in the context it's given, but if you think about how the character's being presented thus far, he's been so assured, so definitive. He's been handing out these lessons that yes make sense, but also don't really fit the context because of why Aang is here to learn. And that kind of moment, he's like, no, I did not. It's a faltering in him that shows the conflict that we're going to see for the rest of the episode, because he accepts blame and this kind of responsibility like that throughout the episode. All the mistakes people point out to him and stuff. This is someone who he's carrying a burden.
I still think though that like if he could like talk with Roku after this episode happened, I think Roku might say, hey, you were right. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, because Zhang's right. And because Roku says, you think I'm weak, like referring to himself or the past avatars or the avatar spirit, whatever. They're not weak, but Aang is. You know what I mean? At this point.
Yeah, but there's also that kind of harshness in it, because while he's definitely not ready, the way he's presenting it is, it's coming from this bitterness, this place of of pain that is in Zhang at the moment. He's not. Even when he starts teaching, he's not really doing this the way he should be doing it. But you completely buy it because it fits his character, fits his spirituality, and it fits the fact that he's an incomplete person at this point. He needs to kind of he needs to reach that point of Iroh tranquility and acceptance. He needs to go and see the sunrise, the sunbenders, basically. But yeah, the start of the training itself, where he kind of brings out Aang onto the river, and start widen your stance, wider. And then talks about the sun. Look at the sun, the greatest source of fire, and it is in perfect balance with the world. He clearly understands the nature of the balance in the bending disciplines, but it's just he hasn't quite ticked that last. He hasn't had
the revelation of the beauty of it.
Yeah. The rainbow kind of spiral. He needs to see that to kind of complete his journey.
I like that he is always, the way he speaks is like he's on the verge of screaming. When Aang's like, what am I gonna, what do I do? He goes, be silent, or whatever. He goes, but I need to concentrate on what, even that oath, knows what he's doing. You know what I mean? Like he's just he's such a good voice actor. What's his name again? We didn't mention in the
Keone
episode.
Young.
Young.
Young, yeah.
Yeah, a really
One of
good
those.
voice actor. This is one of my favorite performances, especially like for somebody who barely shows up. Very
Absolutely.
memorable character.
Absolutely. He's a character you will never forget in Avatar, despite the fact that he does appear twice, effectively.
Yeah,
And very similar. Like I feel like him, and then also going forward, Piandao I think is also a standout as well. Like all the
yeah.
masters that they get.
Or pretty much all the
do
masters,
you, guys,
yeah.
do you guys know who voiced him?
I do
Oh.
not.
The T-1000 from Terminator 2.
I did
No
not know
way.
that.
What's his name? Patrick something? Patrick Wilson?
Robert Patrick. It's either Patrick Robert
Robert
or
Patrick.
Robert Patrick. Okay.
I did not know
Oh my
that.
god, that's so cool. That's so
Piandao,
cool.
yeah.
Yeah, Robert Patrick. Yeah,
But yeah,
that's what's up.
it's good to know. But yeah, the lessons he's teaching Aang, Aang's kind of eager to start with the firebending already, and he's at the moment he's teaching him to focus, concentrate, breathe. Takes him to the top of the mountain. Another bit of glorious animation actually when they show him them climbing and stepping up to the top. There's this kind of natural flow to it. You feel kind of connected with the scene from the way the robes move, the way they're kind of standing and contemplating.
I was just
the
going to
world.
mention that I really like John John's clothes. I know they're all tattered or whatever, but those add a lot to the presentation of the character. And yeah, they're so expressive as much of his face is.
Yeah, the hair as
Though
well.
I will say-
the entire character design for him suits his kind of put together roughness, ruggedness.
They did miss one frame when he was walking back down the mountain. If you look at when he's like going down, there's like a frame missing, and he just kind of like disappears. Like it doesn't.
Oh,
flow.
no.
I did not notice that. I did not
Me
notice
neither.
that.
And it's like boom, and then he just like goes like,
Oh,
but
no.
they missed that frame.
Alright, I'll be watching
very
that later after we're done here.
Yeah, I haven't seen that. Let's go check it out.
But
Forget
then we get to
everything
learn
you
that
said
he
about how
had an old pupil, which
Oh, that's right. Yeah.
we will come to understand as Zhao, which I think even when I first watched it, I kind of got that impression.
Yeah, it's one of the funnier things he says as well, is because Aang barges in on him. Is like, "Hey, I'm done out there." He goes, "I didn't come to get you." And and he's like, "I've been breathing for hours." And he goes, "You wish to stop breathing?" Which is one of the funnier lines.
It's the look on his face as well. Is that you want to stop breathing? He's like looking there, like the expression, perfectly set. Like they put way too much time and effort into animating that one line, and it really pays off. But also the fact that both sides are right again. Aang has come down after hours. It's not like he just abandoned it in a heartbeat. He put the effort in. Okay, I've been told to do this. I'm going to do this. You get the impression at least an hour has passed when he comes back down the mountain.
Yes and no, because he is a monk. You would think that surely he's been made to do something like this by his elders before. Just be patient, Aang. Just do what the guy told you to do. He's gonna try to teach you. Just have some patience.
But I also
and
have
I also
the impression that Aang got airbending so quickly that he didn't really have to go through so much of the breathing or balance, all that kind of stuff. So I feel like in a way he could have been the way he was in this episode, because the impression we get is that he's naturally good with airbending.
Oh no, it's not it makes sense to me that he's that way. It's just it is a flaw in his behavior. He probably should just suck it up and do it as he's told.
Yeah, just suck it up.
Definitely. And again, it comes back to that balance between the flawed nature of his approach and John Johns himself. Because they're both kind of right here. Yes, Aang is being impetuous and is being he's not being patient enough, and he should be focusing on the lesson that John John's clearly trying to teach him. But at the same time, John John is not presenting it as though he's trying to teach him that lesson. He's going with the gruff, just do what I say, and you'll learn why later. He was up there for hours.
Mr. Miyagi, Mr. Miyagi approach was do all this housework, and then he's like, I'm done with this, and then he's like, oh, show me how to paint, and he does it, and he blocks it. He's like, see, I taught you how to do it this whole time.
And
that's what he's teaching him.
Yeah, and it's the lesson makes sense after the fact, but because it's not being presented, with the whole this is why you need to do this kind of idea, Aang's primary kind of focus beyond because of the initial spark for his impatience anyway, is because I don't have time for this. I need to learn firebending.
Right.
I will agree with that, but where Aang's out of gas is this scene, because he now gives him a reason. He's and it's all he says it all with that sigh. At the start of it, he's he's like, this again. I've dealt with this how many times, people that don't have respect for this element and what it can do.
But it's not just the resignation as well. It's the tinge of sadness to it. He's clearly this burden. I've another weight to my shoulders. I have to do this. It's part of my duty. But I also don't want to because I'm so done with this. And then immediately leading into this is why with the kind of discussion of a pupil, and we get the shot of Zhao coming up the river. The
Yeah.
biggest shit-eating smirk on his face at all times on that boat. It's ooh,
Which
you just want to punch him.
Yeah. But yeah, I mean, it's an interesting, and also because it harkens back to like that conversation they had earlier about like, like destiny, and like he used like the like fire's destiny as opposed to like whatever you think yours is, boy, I mean, and it's inarguable that he's right, and like in Zhao sort of demonstrates that because fire is the only one, like he says, it only needs the spark and then it's doing its own thing. It doesn't need you afterward like all the other ones do.
I like the exercise he does too. Like make sure that it's the opposite.
Yeah,
It's like,
that's
make sure
leaf.
this fire does not burn this entire leaf.
And
Such a
Aang,
big exercise.
I wanted to punch Aang in the eye because Aang goes, "This is the worst one ever," and I'm going, "This is the most interesting one he's given you so far."
Right.
Like, I mean, like, and he said, "I promise I'll be more behaved and I'll give it a chance." He gave it 5 seconds of patience. Is literally what he gave it. So, I mean, it was just like, okay, Aang, you're frustrating me.
Yeah, this is the point where he steps out over that line and into the impetuousness. He was. I can understand where he was coming from before, but now you need to learn. This is clearly a demonstration of your restraint and your ability to control yourself. And he's given you the reason why you need to do it in the very previous scene. Just sit down and do it. And this is when the 12-year-old side kicks in. He's like, I want to play with fire.
Yeah.
I want. He's literally playing with fire at this point, which is
Totally
kind of the entire lesson of John. Don't do that.
I totally understand them, but it's just so frustrating. It's like if you're dealing with like a younger relative of your own, or you know what I mean, like who's just not listening or just not getting it and then pissing you off. So yeah, but yeah, so he's playing around with it, like you say, he's just playing with fire, and he tries to replicate the move that like the juggler did at the carnival, and winds up like Katara's like, hey, cool it, settle down. You might do something bad. He's like, I'm not gonna do anything bad.
It's like you're gonna hurt yourself. It's that concern again. Mother
Right,
Katara
yeah.
comes up, and then this is the result. I also like that Jean left for a very specific reason. It wasn't like he just wandered off like he did previously. All appearances gave the intention that he was going to be staying there and watching this. He was going to be monitoring this as a kind of supervisor,
Right.
Mm.
Which kind of tells you a lot about how he's focusing on this particular exercise. But he's immediately called away, by the urgency of the firebenders approaching. And that's what gives us kind of the setup for the scene happening and this mistake happening.
Some ways that's probably a better test though, like when you don't have the supervisor there, making sure that you're doing what you're told. Like Aang was immediately given license to do what he felt like he wanted to do with it, and he misused his abilities immediately.
He failed, ultimately. But it wasn't Jean-Jong's fault. I like the fact that they took him out of that and separated it, and it wasn't a case of neglect effectively in training him. Sokka's reaction to Katara being burnt. Well, first of all, Katara. I like that they didn't make it all overly dramatic. Katara was very realistically just crying in pain because this is you've just burnt your hands. This is very realistic kind of childlike response to this, and just kind of coiling up and just not even talking to anyone, just reacting to this. Meanwhile, Sokka runs in. Family with Aang, but ultimately this is sibling matters here. You burnt my sister. That line is extremely powerful in its simplicity.
And shout out to Zach Taylor because he pulls off like the whole like being apologetic, the voice behind that, and these are all like kid actors like pulling off like these emotional ranges. So you gotta give like shout outs to like the voice work as well in some of these situations.
Absolutely, they're really carrying these lines out in such like a natural level.
I like to imagine that they plucked like a bunch of his nose hairs out with tweezers to get him to cry, like cry and say you're sorry, because it's on
I think
point
I've
with
seen
that.
behind the scenes with him where he was crying in a booth, like for one of the scenes. I can't remember what, but I remember they had like Nickelodeon behind the scenes. You see him in the booth, and I think he was crying for one of the scenes. Like he's,
I can believe it. The delivery of these lines are that he's like, I'm sorry, I didn't mean, and immediately the kind of realization hits you because this is an important moment. If we're to buy that he's going to never firebend again in his mind, we need to see that kind of immediate registry of pain and regret in his face, and you really do in both the way the lines are delivered, the kind of facial expression. This is one of the examples where you see it on Aang more than any other time. He's kind of just recalling back, and with Sokka, understandably, concerned for his sister, and everything feels so natural and real here. It's also one of those moments you can kind of get, you can kind of relate to, aside from obviously the firebending being the cause. I'm pretty sure everyone has had that moment where they've made some very simple mistake with this that's caused another person pain.
Like a sibling or a friend.
Yeah, just you've gone too far with some play fighting or whatever, something like that. This moment has happened to most people.
And also when you were warned not to do it and you did it anyway, like there's also that as well. Everyone's got that.
But by the person who was hurt as well, which makes it even more poignant. It's a really powerful, simple scene, and leading to Katara running off down the river as well. Again, another realistic reaction. She's got to separate herself from this and go and deal with this.
Is this the first time that we've seen people get burned by firebending, other than the flashback with Zuko?
Yeah, I think so.
This sort of makes the consequences feel more real because with it being Nickelodeon, it's not like you can off people every episode with firebending, even though see how easy it is to do that.
Yeah, I think it is the kind of first time it's brought attention to. Yeah. It happens at the end of the episode as well, which I like. It kind of carries up with that for a different reason.
Yeah,
but I like that it kind of addresses the slight burns you're going to get dealing with firebenders, even if you manage to dodge every hit, that kind of thing. But yeah, John's reaction when he comes back and sees this, Sokka's saying, "This is your fault," and I know, he immediately just accepts that blame. Is like I learned, I get this, and of course it's my fault. It's not his fault in this instance, but the fact that he immediately accepts it without hesitation tells you a lot about where he is in his state of mind at the moment. And he warns them off and says he has to go and get out of the area effectively.
The way I read that scene, the way I've always kind of read it, is that he's more mad at himself for agreeing to try in the first place because he's that much of a defeatist about it. He's like, I should have just never taught you anything,
Yeah, this was my mistake. I was pushed when I shouldn't have been. And as well, again, master of small moments. When he's walking away towards the forest and ultimately after Katara, you see a split-second hesitation of where he stops, and it could almost be perceived as just taking another step. Yeah, but it's just that little bit too long to be a step animation, and he hesitates on the edge. It's like, maybe I should say something. Maybe I should should I do something? He's like, no, and then he just steps out. He's the burden's too much, and he goes. It's a really powerful little moment there where he's kind of that indecision and that conflict in the character is represented again.
That's the director putting themselves in the scene, which sometimes can get lost in animation because you're kind of distanced from it when you're drawing it or you're looking over someone drawing it. But putting yourself in the scene and be like, okay, if I were mapping this out with real life actors, what would be the stage direction, and having that in is a mark of a really good director for screen animation.
Yeah, it's really well done, that entire scene, and it's not even the focus of the story as well. It's I love how powerful they can make those tiny moments. But yeah, he goes to speak to Katara, or maybe not even, he maybe just stumbled across her, but either way, he meets up with Katara, and we get before that we see the introduction of healing to Katara, which is a little bit of a weak moment because Katara kind of, you've mentioned this before, Matt. She kind of just gets it. Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
It doesn't feel too cheap to me because the way it's presented is that if you're a powerful waterbender, this is something that can manifest. It's a presented thing that happens to more than one people. This isn't just Katara being super special as a main character and getting this. It's something that happens naturally for all of them, or all of the greats, or even some of the greats. But ultimately, for Avatar, I feel like this should have been earned. This ability.
I agree with that. I mean, I feel like, it's fine. It's not horrible, but it could have been more. There just could have been more to it than this, because there's literally she just puts her hands in the water, and I do like when we get to it that it's called out a little bit, her lack of an explanation as to how she can do it. But I also take this moment as proof that waterbending ought to be your favorite element, folks, because even the Fire Nation Grandmaster is like, I wish I was a waterbender,
Yeah. It's another powerful scene where he's talking to her and just saying, I wish I had, long have I, yearned to be able to do what you can do and be rid of this burden. And she's like, but you can do things that I'll never be able to do. Great power. And it's like, yes, but fire just destroys.
He calls it a burning curse, which is a really cool. I like that. He just feels like a character that lives in this world. He's not the voice of okay, we need stern mentor. This is stern mentor who grew up in the Avatar world. He feels so he he embodies this character so well. I love it.
Yeah, and it just everything he says, builds on that, and this again, the burning curse. You say that's his whole perspective of firebending. His kind of something that should be he should take pride in, and he should be a part of who he is as a person. He's trying to separate himself from it. And it's causing, and it's like the dividing line between his own perspective and the inner conflict that he's got. And Katara's, she's like she feels sad for him.
Yeah, and I mean, the idea that she can do what she can do, it's the first time that if it's the first time you've seen the series, you don't know about waterbenders being healers in the first place. This is the first time that that's revealed. But the idea that she can do that, and that we see in this episode she could do it for other people, even in his mind, what can he do with his bending? Like nothing he wants to. Like it always is going to involve combat or something. He can't do anything more than that. Like, which is a big deal. Like if you have the right mindset for it, if you have like a healthy mind about it, it's still cool. But to him, it's just useless.
Yeah, he's got that unhealthy mindset at this point, and the fact that it's so believable in everything he says and does, it really brings up the power. But at the same time, we see that fireball come in, and in an instant, he's up on his feet and deflecting it.
Well, and I also just love before that point, because they're having like this little sweet scene, and it's like a shot from the behind them, and they're just talking about peace, and he's like, "I love that you can do healing," and then all of a sudden, you just got like fire blast like in front of them, and then you turn into like he turns it on.
Yeah, immediately straight into combat mode.
I wonder who's here. The Zhao's here, like great balls of fire here, I mean, couldn't have been a less subtle intro for him.
Yeah, but it's the juxtaposition of that peaceful moment with the explosion of fire, and it perfectly establishes his point. Here is this peaceful moment where you are healing yourself, and then immediately fire comes in, blast of disruption, death, burning the trees. But at the same time, John John's at the heart of it, immediately deflecting, not a moment's hesitation. His mastery has not faltered. And I love the kind of the flow of the motion he makes. It's almost Airbender like in his execution.
There's great balls of fire, and then he's like, Katara, get out of here, and then he makes a great wall of fire.
Yeah, which is terrifying by itself. I mean,
probably
it is
the single like non-Sozin
comet.
This is Sozin's comet stuff.
Yeah, non-avatar state, non-Sozin's comet firebending. This is one of the biggest displays, and he does it. He almost does it as well with an earthbending stance. The way he kind of
he does. I'm glad that you pointed that out.
Yeah, a wall comes up. Yeah, airbender deflection and then earthbending. This is someone again buying into your headcanon theory of the Iroh connection.
Right.
This is someone who understands the idea of balance in the world and the adoption of other cultural
Yeah. The idea that any bender should be able to do that, though, with any of their elements, though. You know what I mean? But those are the two firebenders that are prominent that would get it.
Yeah.
And it's also a nice dichotomy. Oh, go ahead.
Sorry, you go first.
I don't think he actively understands it yet, but he's doing what he should be doing in terms of we see he's doing this earthbender stance, but then also his flow is like an airbender. He's doing this balance, and what the benders should learn from the Avatar isn't just this is our big protector who can just come in and be Superman for us, but also just learning that we should emulate what this dude's doing. We might not be able to do waterbending and earthbending at the same time, but we can adapt to each other to find a better balance within our own elements. And he's deep inside him, he understands that, but he just can't bring that forth in the same way Iroh
it's that
has.
single point of disconnect between them. He gets the two philosophies and he's applying them. He just doesn't register it yet. He needs to see that spark of life moment. Have that Zuko spiral rainbow and Aang as well. I think
it's also cool. I think it's also cool the underlying personality trait there that comes out sort of maybe involuntarily between the two, and that Iroh only calls attention to this in season 2 when he's talking about lightning redirection, and that's specifically derived from waterbending. You talked about how this is reminiscent of earthbending. It's sort of like that stubborn, sort of almost stubbornly defeatist. You know what I mean? Like he's reaching deep inside, for something inside of him, and he's using his powers in this crazy way, but it's something he doesn't want to do. So it's almost hard-headed fire. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And he's literally making a wall.
Yeah.
Yes.
He's
literally making a wall.
And that's the thing. He's making that wall, but all of the spiritual and kind of character references that we've made, relevance, it's super powerful, and that's why I like it. But also the simpler fact of, earthbenders would be throwing up a wall here. And, this is this we've seen from firebending from now and in the future in the series. We see, bursts of fire from the hand, spirals from the leg, they're almost always just you rocketing fire blasts out. This is the first time we see kind of a sustained, apparition of energy, from which exactly as it would be for Earth. If you just change that to a blast of Earth coming out of the ground, that's an Earthbending move. But because he's a Firebender, it's adopting it into that physical change. It's the blend of the spiritual, the character, narrative, and the actual in-world mechanics of this. If a Firebender does this, this is what happens. And on top of the fact that it's the most powerful display we've seen, it just everything about it, and all it is just a mechanic to get them to come to the shore and engage them and keep Katara safe. This isn't like this. This isn't the opening move of a great fight. He immediately then lowers it. It's just there's so much power in that one moment. It's beautiful.
Here's how you do a master. Like we were kind of getting at this earlier when talking about different ways. But if you ever want to tell a story, like model your characters somewhat after this. Use this as like your archetype. Yeah.
Make sure everything they do and say ties into who they are and how that makes them a master. That's the important thing.
And just I don't know what to call this, brazen stupidity. I don't know what this is, but like the fact that Zhao just gets out like to confront this guy after what he just did. I don't know if that's just wishful thinking or what that is, but yeah.
Well,
I mean, Zhao,
he does say that he gave up fighting a long time ago, so presumably he doesn't think he's actually going to fight him. But even then, yeah, you're right. It's a bit dim. I do like the way he kind of broke through the wall though. He stuck his hand through and then sort of opened up the curtain, like defying the firebending. It's very cool.
Yeah, it's sort of like. I guess Zhao isn't a coward, not really. So I mean, like, he's got that going for him. I will say, this episode it doesn't really give me a higher opinion of Zhao, but we kind of like have compared him to in unfavorable terms to like the likes of Iroh and Zuko and other characters, right? And I think that's still warranted. I'm not sure how this guy earned the title of master, but he is at least demonstrated in this episode, I think more so than any of his others, to be a powerful bender. When you see the amount of destruction he can cause, like not even meaning to, which is sort of like the opposite of like real mastery, but still, it's like he's got a lot of power backing him up. So he's a threat to be taken seriously, at least.
Yeah, you can see why certain people would consider him a master, even though they don't get the actual underlying, core of what makes one that way. But you can see the kind of instructor level. Okay, you can make this fireball this big and execute it in this way. Sure, nothing else. But we at least buy that much from what we see here. And I like that his confidence is born of arrogance rather than, confidence, I guess. He's blazingly coming through here, thinking you won't fight me, so I can do this, haha. And then immediately proven right with the attack of the other firebenders. Cuts away to the gang again as Katara returns. We have that moment with Aang, who has now stepped inside again the penitent circle of representation for the candles. He's now exactly where Jeon was. He's in this moment of of restrained, constrained mindset. He's like, oh God, what have I done? I'm never going to firebend again. And he gets the lesson, and he sits right there in the middle, exactly where he was. I love how that kind of puts him in the mindset of the master he's learning from. So visually.
Yeah, that's I can't add anything to that. That's very well put.
Yeah.
That's. I would say it came full circle, but it's more like it came half circle because the way you phrased it, like he learned the lesson. It's more like he learned just enough to get to where Zhang is, which is like done with it.
Yeah, that's what I mean.
Really learning the lesson. He doesn't get over that for some time. Yeah.
Yeah, but I like the fact that he's where his master is because he's learned that lesson. That's what he has to teach him, and that's what.
It's interesting. Yeah, and you don't see that often. You don't see it that often where they get to like the same stage of jaded, that the master's at. It's usually more complete than that.
He's learned the wrong lesson, but it was the lesson that the master had to teach him. It's
right. Yeah.
It's very good for series writing too, because you don't want to like solve the problems each episode. You need to kind of have the characters a little bit reset by the end, especially if you're doing a long form type of thing. Like Harry Potter, he kind of resets almost at the end of every book or any kind of other series. Same thing. So yeah, I like that it's like a half circle kind of situation.
He's also sitting in a half circle, which is interesting by that self. But yeah, as well.
Back to John and
sorry, so before we get to that, even when the camera pans down, we see it focus on his avatar arrow, or airbending arrow. The kind of the pan shot of that coming down as it's going. Focus of Katara, Aang's arrow, Aang's face. I like the kind of fade in of that because that's the kind of level of priorities we're dealing with here in the scene. Just that shot by itself was good. But I also like that it took Katara saying my hands are healed to snap Aang out of it. That was almost a base requirement for him to getting out of this semi semi part of the funk. I liked that was kind of the thread that pulled him out and brought him to the urgency of and then having to save Jean-Jean. It was that level of connection to Katara, understanding of the problem not being as severe as it initially thought it was, and then I have to save my master. It's duty again, bringing Aang to life. The call. It's the same reason he accepted the call to heroism in the first place. Which then leads us into the Jean-Jean scene, where he just schools them.
He did a Dumbledore basically.
Yeah.
Jean-Jean's got
What did they call it? He did a bunk. Did they say he did a bunk or something? I don't know what the British term to use.
Yeah, no, that's the Snape one. Yeah.
That's when Snape.
He has to use the common parlor. Done a bunk. But yeah,
I always forget that line. Sorry, not to derail it, but I always forget that line about how Dumbledore's gut style is actually in the book. It's just said by a different character.
Yeah. But yeah, the scene where he's breaking through. Question: do you think Jean-Jean is a pacifist? Because when he says that he doesn't, he doesn't fight anymore, it kind of could give that impression.
So.
Yeah. I mean, maybe not an absolute pacifist, but he's
not
definitely a
Jet,
pacifist.
where he's like attacking the village or like doing anything active in that way.
He wants to be left alone, and
right?
No one's letting him do that. So it's like he's just gonna like leave, like he doesn't. He probably could beat them, but just doesn't deign to.
Oh, absolutely could beat him. I mean,
he can beat them. He just doesn't want to put himself in that situation or trigger what he thinks,
Or maybe it might be. It might be that he thinks that if I'm gonna beat you, I have to kill you, and he doesn't want to do that.
Exactly. Exactly, because he doesn't know, I don't know how to use my fire to subdue you without maiming you.
Yeah.
It's really hard to do if you think about it.
Which I mean, we saw. That's what I was gonna say is that what Aang did, that was not even a lot of fire. That was actually pretty little. Compared, you know what I mean? Especially even compared to what Zhao's doing. Zhao's got some pretty big plumes of fire in this episode. I mean, it feels stupid to say that after Zhang wall. Nothing looks big compared to that. But you get what I mean. It gives you more respect for everybody, from people at the Azula end of the spectrum to just more common firebenders, for not fucking up everything they see by accident, because it takes a lot of control, as we see.
That ability to kind of cut it off at the end and pull it back in without setting ablaze the entire forest, and that's the kind of dividing line between the Masters and Zhao, who just doesn't get that, or doesn't care. I mean, he's not even trying to do that. He just doesn't care about the destruction he's causing, which is the big thing. He's the conqueror, not the.
The way Zhao uses his fire is the way Fiend Fire works in Harry Potter, where he just lets it go loose and he has no control of it once it's loose.
Yeah, which is the lesson that he learns here, because Aang, uses what he knows about Zhao Zhao from Jean-Jean about the restraint, and to turn it against him.
And it's in keeping with his personality and also the backstory that Zhang gave, where it's my pupil wanted to use it to just wipe everything out of his path, and his whole motivation is literally this guy wants to wipe out the moon. That's his own. He doesn't think any other way. He just wants to move.
That's his plan. Yeah, that's his plan.
Which
is probably
point.
Maybe that is okay, because the whole season we've been like, why is this guy being promoted? Why is this guy being promoted? But then, think about it. Ozai's at the head of this, and he probably admires his sort of mentality, and also he probably came out with his hey, I have this plan for killing the moon. He's I'm down.
Interesting question. Do you think Ozai knew about that? Because I feel like even Ozai in all his insanity would have been maybe tone it down a bit, mate. We kind of need that.
He definitely sanctioned the attack on the he Azula says father blames uncle for the failure at the North Pole, so Ozai knew and approved of the invasion. I don't know that he knew about taking out the moon.
I get the invasion bit. I just don't think he accepted, even though I just get the impression that even he wouldn't go along with that plan, which tells you a lot about the kind of insanity Zhao. Oh my god, Zhao was thinking, not Zhao. Zhao was thinking in that moment, with that whole plan.
And what's his name? Zhao is totally on his own planet with that one. That's his own private plan that he just discovered even the ability to do that on his own. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Zhong, because he's the one who actually has two names. His smirk when he disappears. I enjoyed that. I don't know why, because it doesn't really kind of fit what we know about him. But in that moment, it kind of is I'm. Bye, and just disappears in the ball of flame as Aang arrives. What do you think was going through his head there? Because in theory, he's leaving Aang to fight these guys.
I think because he said right there, he said like, "Don't face him," or like, "I've never seen such raw power." He's like, "I don't know exactly what's gonna happen, but I know you're about to get fucked up, Zhao." Like he's just out. Like
Yeah, like
that's
how
what I
much?
think.
Yeah, he has a lot of faith in Aang, given that what he's seen from him. I've never seen such raw power. It's like, I mean, you saw him use one tiny fireball. I feel like that was
And I
maybe
think, yeah, but
it would have had been like a personal,
but if
spiritual
if he
side.
can tell that he hasn't, if he can tell so much about him just from like the way he moves through the camp, like maybe just what he did to Katara is enough for him to know what he, is capable of. Like he's one of those characters.
Yeah. Oh yeah. I
think you
definitely
just
get that he reads him, but it's just interesting that that's what he took from what he saw from Aang. It has to be that kind of deep. It reinforces that deeper connection with him. Which it's not criticism. I enjoy it. But yeah, that smirk of how, yep, okay, I'll leave this to you then, and disappear on the spot. Even though it's
might have even
conflicting
been
the whole "you'll be destroyed" thing.
This is me writing my own story now, so like ignore this if you want. But like it might even have been his way of taunting Zhao to face Aang. Like if I tell you not to do this, I know you're going to do it.
Could be, yeah, very true. Either way, it was awesome. I like the way he just disappears on the spot, and it gets the infantry out of the way as well, because Zhao then sends him to chase him off into the forest. The fight between Aang and Zhao is a particular highlight for me because of how it speaks towards the natures of fire and earth, as well as the lesson that Aang has learned in this episode by itself. Not just about the nature of both and the nature of firebending itself.
Fire and air?
Yeah. How...
Air.
Earth. Okay.
So did I say earth?
Yeah.
Sorry, I meant air. With Aang, the lessons of the two elements themselves, with the evasion and the confrontation of the two, but also the lesson about the character. He learned about Zhongzhong's people, which he now knows to be Zhao. That the fact that he's putting those two lessons together, and that's what earns him the victory. I really like seeing on screen. It's so many layers of execution to all of the Avatar stuff, but also the fight itself is just engaging. The fire blasts. I particularly enjoyed the taunting. It's like, I don't know why, but I thought you'd be better than Zuko. It's like that was the absolute best thing he could have said to just annoy the hell out of
especially
Zhao.
with
Because
Agni Kai.
we've all thought that at some point ourselves.
It was just the execution of it was brilliant. But yeah, the animation as well. As always, top notch.
I also like before it really starts the line that Zhao has. I think it's my favorite Zhao line. Like just the way he says it, more than what the line is itself. Is like when he goes, "You were Zhongzhong's student." He goes, "Until I got bored," because that. What I like about that is because that's a quality that Aang, in his heart of hearts, should know. Oh, I can kind of relate to that. Like that's what undid me too. You know what I mean?
It's
I
it's
think
a
it's a really good
warning shot
point.
kind of thing.
The line about being better than Zuko, because we just saw, I don't know if it was last episode or 2 episodes ago, where we had a Zuko and Aang fight, and how that went on a lot longer, and it was a lot more of a fight of equals than this one, which was like very much a one-sided affair. Was it 2
Definitely.
episodes ago we saw it?
It was one episode ago.
Yeah,
It's
one
just
episode, yeah.
It's just been
been
that
a
long
while
since we've
since
done
we
one.
recorded.
It's been a while.
That was the Batu episode.
Mm.
But yeah, I mean, I will say that I like that it sort of establishes that Aang is, while he's perfectly capable of what he's doing, he's not doing it as easily as he's making it seem. He's putting on that front to piss Zhao off, but there are moments where he's like shitting his pants a little bit.
Yeah.
I
mean, from the burn that we see he gets later from the fight, and also just the nature of the animation and the execution of each move, when he throws himself against the deck of the boat and he's like, as the fire blasts over, this isn't just a cakewalk for him.
Yeah, I wonder why we don't actually see the burns happen real time. Like maybe it's a standards and practices thing where like you can't show him get the burn, but you can show the burn, or like they all have stupid rules in television.
I imagine it's something like that. Showing kids being burnt on screen is probably a no-no on that level.
But it's all really good motivation and development for Zhao, because after this we see pretty much everyone going into the finale and everyone's motivation going into it. So this also establishes, because he is the main. I mean, so is Zuko, but he's like the main catalyst for the antagonism going forward in like the rest of the episodes.
Yeah. And the finale of the episode itself, the very last shot happens at the very tail end of the episode. But before we cut away from Zhao here, at the conclusion of the fight, he's looking around at the destruction he's wrought, thanks to Aang pointing it out. And you see kind of a realization and acceptance in his face. He's not learnt the lesson by any means, but you see him kind of accept, like, ugh, and he's like, I did this, and I catalog it, learn it, at least on a tactical level, that you've made a mistake here. You see that kind of acceptance in the face, and again, great line work with him on the animation. But
To me,
ultimately,
that's-
he's not learned
oh,
a spiritual lesson. Sorry.
No, no, of course not. Yeah. No, to me, that's what makes the scene make sense to stop where it does, because he's too upset to continue. Because really, there's no reason he can't keep firing at Aang. When like Aang's like, "Look what you did!" Like he's just standing in front of him.
Home.
But yeah, but he really got to him enough that he just he stops, and like because he's more pissed off now than trying to continue.
Yeah.
Because Aang's literally just like, I'm off now. Like I mean, there's no reason he can't continue.
Yeah.
But
Well,
aside
Appa
from he's just too
arrives
mentally.
before then, you're right. He could just keep
Before
blasting
that,
the water.
yeah.
He could just chase him down.
But
But
he's
no
just
problems. But he's raging at
mentally
Yeah.
mentally compromised. I was crazy. We've established this.
Yeah, you kind of see the Ozai style fire breath shot where he's just screaming into the air. Yeah, he's been beaten, very satisfyingly so. But with that, the rest of the gang arrive on Appa and they fly off for the usual ending scene. We see Katara's healing coming back into the fore, and Sokka going, "How did you do that?" And it's like, "I guess I've always been able to do it." It's like,
Right.
well, thanks for all the first aid over the years.
I know. Yeah.
I would be in his shoes. Yeah, I felt for him there.
Like, remember that time I was crying when I got that thing? Oh my god. Oh no, they bring that up because he got something stuck. Oh, what was it? That he got stuck in his
Fish
finger.
hook. And
The
his, and
fish
his,
hook.
Fish hook, and
yeah.
he got a second one stuck in when he tried to get it.
Yeah, tried to use to
Yeah.
get the other one out. Yeah.
Thanks for all the first aid over the years. That's really been helpful. Thanks a lot, Katara.
Yeah, Sokka sass, coming to the forefront again and absolutely making sense. I like you said before, Matt. I like the fact that they draw attention to the kind of ridiculousness of
Weak
never using
moment
this
there.
before. Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, it makes sense,
Yeah.
because she hasn't been using her powers to the full level she
No.
has to this point. So maybe it's the mastery she's
Oh.
growing towards that unlocks it for her. But still,
Freely admit, I admit when I was a kid and I watched this and have a problem with that. It's just in retrospect, like when you see what a business they make of learning lightning or lightning redirection or mastering the avatar state, it could have been more interesting, the healing
yeah,
thing. But
it's fine
it-
as
you
it
know.
is. It just could have been more. That's the big problem. Is
Yeah.
it's the potential that could have been there rather than the flaw itself. For sure, yeah. But that's the end of the episode.
That's sort of the end, yeah.
Yeah. Any closing thoughts?
It just, again, stunningly well animated. I love, and there were little things that we didn't mention. Like, there's one part where when Zhang first comes out to talk to Aang after sort of talking with him about Zhao's backstory, he's like, "We're going to work with fire now." And Aang does like a flip through the air or whatever. And he lands back on the rock that he had been sitting on. And like, just because he's an airbender, like that influence he has, when he comes back down, there's like the ripples through the water, like little things like that. It's just such the word animation, they really gave life to this whole episode. I love it.
Even in that instance, the leaves that are being thrown around as well by his airbender, that's what leads to Zhao's catching of it. And Zhong's catching of it, and beginning the lesson. They bleed every moment into one another, and they don't waste anything in each scene. And this episode is definitely one of the strongest for that. Any last closing thoughts, Antoine?
No, that's pretty much it. I think it's just a really good lead-in for the Natalie episodes, not just for the gang, but also for our antagonist, Zhao.
Yeah, completely agree. And definitely one of my favourite episodes overall, throughout the entire series even, but definitely book one.
I would say it's definitely slotted in my top 3 from book 3, or book 1 right now.
Absolutely. Same with me. After the Storm and the Blue Spirit. Arguably on par with the Blue Spirit for me. But yeah, those are our thoughts on episode 16, The Deserter, guys. Please put in the comments anything you'd like to discuss that we've missed or something that we've covered and you just want to go into greater depth. We look forward to reading your thoughts on this. I'm Rutty4, and I still don't have an outro.
What a liar. Grey Jedi 91. Take care, guys.
Antoine, be water, my friends.
Goodbye.